Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alan Goodwin. I am with the UDO team of the Charlotte Planning Department. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. We'll get started in just a minute. I'll let everybody have a minute to get settled and get everything organized the way you like it. Like to introduce, first of all, our Planning Commission Chair Douglas Welton has joined us today. Douglas, nice to see you here. I'd also like to introduce some of our UDO team that will be helping us today. Laura Harmon, Kevin May, and also Mariah Wozniak. So without any further ado, let's get started with our presentation. I'm going to share my screen and somebody give me a thumbs up when you can see it. I don't see any thumbs up.
We see it, Alan.
See it.
Okay, thank you. We're here to talk about a text amendment to the Unified Development Ordinance. It's a general update text amendment, and we'll get started in the slides. And the way this meeting will work is that we'll present information on the proposed text amendment, and you are welcome to provide your comments as we go or ask questions. And I ask that you do that using the chat feature of Zoom. And as I'm going along, Laura and Kevin will be trying to respond to your comments or questions in chat in live time. And then at the end, if we have time, we can stop and go back, or we can take any additional comments. I see that Kevin has already put some links to some resources in the chat. I think he's going to do that at the end of the meeting as well. So if you want to go in and check those resources out, they will be, this meeting is being recorded, and we will have a recording available on the UDO website in a few days, as well as this presentation. These slides will be available. So if you miss something as we go along, because we've got a lot of very in-depth material to cover, and you're not going to be able to absorb it all in one sitting. So if you want to go back and look at these slides again on your own, they'll be available on our website. So with that, let's get going. We're going to focus today only on this UDO text amendment. It's petition number 2024-121, and we're going to hear your feedback on it. If you've got questions on other parts of the UDO, we're not going to take those today, but you can address them to us using the email address that you see on the screen, charlotteudo at charlottenc.gov. So just a little background on the UDO. If you're here, you probably know a lot about this already, but this is the city's primary implementation tool to implement the policies of the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan. The UDO was adopted by City Council in August of 2022 and became effective on June 1st of 2023. It is intended to be a living document, meaning that it will be revised and updated as time goes on to keep it relevant and to clarify things and address any problems or concepts or uses or best practices as needed. This text amendment is probably, I should have counted, it could be about the 8th or 10th one that we've done since the UDO was adopted. And so we anticipate, that as we move forward, there will be occasion to do future text amendments to keep this document relevant. So if you go onto our website, and we'll show you at the end where it is, you probably have already found it. You can read this current text amendment, and you'll see it as a red line document. So the way that you read it is any text that we're proposing to remove will be struck through, and you'll see it in red. Any new text that we propose to add will be also in red, but it will be underlined. Occasionally, there will be entire sections that we're going to change, and we may strike through an entire section and replace it with new text. So you may see that as well. So this text amendment was filed in October 11th. It addresses items that have been identified by the community, the industry, meaning the development and design industry generally, and by our own city staff. We had a session last evening at 6 o'clock covering the same materials and slides that we'll be covering here today. And so this is our second of 2 public information sessions. City Council will have a public hearing on this text amendment on November 18th. So let's dig in a little bit. This is a really high level list of things that this text amendment will do. And I'll just read these really quickly, and then we'll get into more detail in the coming slides. So we're updating some general definitions. We're adjusting some use permissions and prescribed conditions, some revisions to certain dimensional and design standards in several of the UDO zoning districts, making minor changes to our parking and landscaping and tree articles. We're creating a new vintage sign category that will replace a couple of our current sign categories, making some adjustments to our alternative compliance and EX zoning standards and other minor revisions. So that's just a really high level of what this text amendment will touch. But now we're going to go through it in a great deal of detail, and I have to caution you, it is a lot of detail to absorb. So I'm not going to cover I'm not going to read every bullet point on every slide word for word, because we'd be here for a couple more hours. But we will go through them all, and I'll try to pick out some highlights. So I've done this by article. So the text amendment is going to make revisions to several of the 39 articles. I think we're actually touching about 23 of the 39 articles in the UDO. So we'll go through these slides and the changes article by article. So starting with Article 2, which is our definitions, we're adding some new general definitions. We're taking out a couple of those old sign definitions, and we're making a minor adjustment to a definition. So you can see in that call out how that would look in the text amendment if we're making an adjustment. The one that I've pulled out there is the old language used to read on the same lot as the principal building. And you can see that we struck through the word lot and replaced it with the word site. So after the text amendment, it will say on the same site as the principal building. So that's generally how it works. When you look at it, you should see all those changes in red, but for some reason they're in blue here on my slide. The
Hey,
next,
Alan, are you screen sharing something from the actual language, the text?
I'm not. I'm just.
Oh.
Are you seeing slides on your monitor?
No, I'm not. I was just wondering if you were screen sharing something that we should be following.
I can see it
Oh,
now.
yeah, absolutely. I am. Yes, you should be seeing something on your screen. I'm sharing slides.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Article 4. It is the article that has the neighborhood 1 zoning districts, and we've made a few suggested changes here. I won't, as I said, I won't read them all, but I will leave the slide up so that you can scan through it and see what jumps out at you. We've got some modifications on language in our conservation residential development option for alleys and green area and landscape yards. Also, we're clarifying in the first bullet point where setbacks are measured from in the neighborhood 1 zoning districts. Neighborhood 1 is, you probably are aware, our lower density residential districts, N1A through N1F. So I'll leave this slide here for a minute, and then we'll move on to the next slide. This change is the same change in all of these districts. And so I'm not going to go over each individual district, but they are Articles 5, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. And you can see all of the zoning districts that are affected by this change. And it's the same change for all of those zoning districts that you see listed above. And what this does is clarifies the language in the site layout tables for each of those districts to specify that the primary pedestrian entry of the principal structure closest to the intersection on a corner lot may be oriented to either frontage. So that was not clear, and this will hopefully clarify that. You can see in the photo an example of, say, a commercial building that's on a corner lot. It has the doorway, the principal entrance facing the street to the left, but with this text amendment, they could have easily put the primary doorway on the frontage facing to the right. And that's what this does. It also adds that the site layout standards apply to duplex dwellings in each of those zoning districts as well. I'm going to move on to the next. Article 14 is the article that has all of our several overlay districts. In this text amendment, we'll touch two of them. First, the Neighborhood Character Overlay District, or the NCO. It makes modifications that are dealing with how you establish eligibility for applying for a neighborhood character overlay, as well as talking about the neighborhood character plan, which is a part of the process. So adds some various standards for NCO districts. So you can go into the actual text amendment if you are interested in that and actually see what those proposed changes are. And the other overlay district that we are touching is the Residential Infill Overlay District, or RIO, R-I-O. And we're making some modifications to that, clarifying that the RIO standards apply to single-family duplex and tris, and that they do not apply to non-residential or residential other than those single-family duplex and tris, and also some modifications to the approval process. So again, if you're interested in the residential infill, check out that text amendment and dig a little deeper and see what those changes are. We've got several things to talk about in Article 15, which is our land use, our uses article. The first is that we would allow duplex, triplex, and quadruplex dwellings in 5 additional zoning districts subject to prescribed conditions. And you can see those districts are the N2C, which is our neighborhood 2 district, residential district, CR, which is a regional commercial district, OG, which is general office, CG, which is general commercial, and OFC, which is office flex campus. So making some changes to where and how duplex, tris, and quads would be allowed. The next is the text amendment would allow standalone duplex, triplex, and quads on small lots in 14 zoning districts with prescribed conditions. And I've listed what those 14 districts are. Lots of a half acre or less and legally existing prior to June 1st, 2023 can develop standalone duplex, tris, and quads in these zoning districts. Also, this would allow multi-dwelling developments with prescribed conditions in the OFC and OG, or general office zoning districts. So I'll leave this here if you want to take a quick read through that before I move on to the next slide. And again, if you've got questions as we go along, put them in chat, and Laura and Kevin will try to provide a response to you in live time as we go, or if you want to wait until the end and make yourself a note to get back to a certain slide, if we have time, we can certainly do that. Staying in Article 15 uses, we are adding a new use definition for accessory outdoor storage. We're modifying a few of the use definitions, and we are adding a clarification to the definition of a salvage or junkyard. All right, this looks like a lot of material, but it's really fairly simple. What this talks about is modifying the prescribed condition for certain uses that stipulate that for campuses, these uses as listed below, and you can see that long list of uses below, those lists, uses rather, shall be owned and operated by or shall have a formal affiliation with the primary institution of that campus. That was not clear, but essentially what this does is that it allows these uses in a campus district if they are owned and operated by the principal institution in that campus, or if they have a formal affiliation with that campus. The other changes that are to the right there, which are unrelated to the thing I just talked about, are we're adding a maximum area requirement to the prescribed conditions for a commercial kitchen. And we're adding an accessory use prescribed condition for accessory outdoor storage. Told you this was deep in the weeds. We're moving on to the next article, Article 16, which is our general development standards. And again, we've got several things that we're doing here. I'll just try to pull out a couple that I think might be of most interest to you. We're modifying the applicability for our exterior lighting standards. Also in our development bonus table, we're modifying the bonus available for EV charging to say that EV ready spaces can meet the requirements for EV capable at a 2-to-1 ratio, or EV installed spaces can count as 4 EV capable or 2 EV ready. If you know anything about EV parking, if not, we cover that in a different article. You can find out more about EV parking requirements. And also we're adding a bonus menu option for reservation of future rights of way for transit corridors. So that is a new option available on our development bonus table. Again, I'll leave this up here for just a minute before we move on. And I see that we are getting some questions or comments. Thank you, Nancy. I know that would be of interest to you. Okay, I'm going to move on to Article 17, which is the article that covers accessory structures, and a few changes that we're making here. Some locational and screening standards for EV charging in parking lots. And then the last bullet I'll talk a little bit about because this is a new change. For ground mounted and wall mounted utility structures and mechanical equipment like, I don't know, backflow preventers, HVAC compressors, things of that nature, can be located in an established setback, but not in a required setback if it's screened on 3 sides by a wall. So that's a change from the current standards. And if you're in certain zoning districts, you can use a fence or even evergreen shrubs in lieu of a wall. And so we're going to add this illustration into the UDO to just make clear what we intend for that new screening standard for those types of utilities. Moving on to Article 19, which is our vehicle and bicycle parking requirements. The top bullet I'll talk about, we're moving the 2 commercial districts, CR and CG, from tier 1 of the parking table, tier 2, which is what they're in now, to tier 1, unless they're in a center's place type. So what that means essentially is that those 2 commercial districts will go from having both a minimum parking requirement and a maximum parking requirement, because that's what uses of districts in tier 2 have, to tier 1, which has a minimum parking requirement but has no maximum. So we were having some issues with certain commercial uses wanting or needing more parking than the tier 2 would have allowed, because tier 2 had a maximum. So we're going to move those 2 districts into tier 1, which does not have a maximum parking unless you're in a center's place type. So that's a significant change for those 2 districts. Also, again, with our EV parking, we're making some modifications on if you have required EV parking, how certain different types of chargers can count for various requirements. And finally, in the last bullet, we are modifying the conditions that would trigger a requirement for bike parking. So if you have a new principal or accessory structure that results in a requirement for 5 or more bike parking spaces, or if you've got a new principal or accessory use that's conducted primarily outdoors that results in a requirement for 5 or more bike parking spaces, then those two conditions would trigger the bike parking requirement. Next, we're going to stay at Article 19 for a little while. We are modifying how we calculate the requirements for bike parking. What else is in there that might interest you? I think maybe the second to the last bullet, if you're designing a parking structure, we're clarifying where you can put your mechanical and electrical rooms if you're using the option C, design option C for parking structures, which is ground floor active use spaces. So that's probably a little bit in the weeds for most of you, but I see a couple of designers here that might be of interest to them. Going to move on now to our next article, Article 20, which is covers landscaping, screening, and tree protection. And again, we've got several changes that we're highlighting here. One thing that may be of interest to anybody who's developing a larger residential site would be that we're now allowing, or would be allowing, land clearing and inert debris landfills, LCIDs, to be subtracted from the site area when you're calculating your area for a green area. So that is a significant change for certain types of development. Also, clarifying that public infrastructure projects like roads and utilities that are undertaken by a public entity are exempt from tree planting requirements. Generally speaking, there's a caveat there. Moving on, I mentioned this earlier, Article 22 covers signs. We are taking away a couple of sign categories and replacing them with a new sign category, vintage signs. Not too significant a change there. But I'm going to move on next to Article 32, which covers new streets and transportation improvements. And the first 3 bullets have to do with standards for existing and new CATS bus stops, as well as thresholds for new CATS bus stops. So when a development project would be required to add a bus stop to the project, we've modified those standards. And finally, the 4th bullet, the requirements for when curb and gutter have to be relocated on collectors and arterials. We are probably, in all candor, still working on that 4th bullet, and that may be changed before this text amendment actually goes to a decision. So stay tuned on that 4th bullet. Moving on, we're getting close to the end of our articles. Article 35 is ordinance bodies and administrators, and it modifies the powers and duties of our Alternative Compliance Review Board, the ACRB, and it adds experience criteria for a majority of members of the ACRB so that a majority of members have expertise and experience in a certain disciplines to serve on that board. Article 38 deals with nonconformities, and it says that a nonconforming use located within a structure can be expanded or enlarged by additions under the conditions listed below, and that is that the expansion of the nonconforming use doesn't exceed 25% of the gross floor area of the structure, or 1,000 square feet, whichever is less, and that only one expansion of a nonconforming use within a structure is permitted. Article 37 is amendments and development approvals, and we're touching a couple of pieces of this article. The first is our exception, or EX district. We're making some changes there to modify the purpose statement, making some clarifications on the permitted land uses that altering them, altering uses through an EX is not allowed. Modifying standards for convention centers, public transit facilities, and stadium uses as relates to parking and upper floor transparency and blank walls. And for the alternate compliance section, which is generally section 37.10, we're making some modifications there. And finally, the bullet at the very bottom of this slide is probably of the most interest here to a lot of you. We're modifying the vesting permit provisions and extending the vesting period from 12 months to 3 years. However, the vesting period is going to stay at 12 months for certificates of appropriateness. That covers all of the changes. And we can stop here if somebody wants to go back to a slide and look at something again. Or if you have any questions, I'll just stop here for a minute and give you some time if you do have anything. Okay, I see something in chat from Nancy, and I'm going to trust that Laura or Kevin can speak to that. Unless Laura or Kevin, if you need Nancy to clarify the question.
I don't think so. Nancy, so right now, the CG and CR zoning districts are all in the middle tier, and they have a maximum parking in that tier. And yet those districts are probably some of our more parking demanding districts. And so we are saying that they should be in the tier that does not have a maximum, unless those zoning districts, CG and CR, are in a centers place type. So we're really fixing what we think was probably a mistake initially in the UDO and realigning. If you're CG or CR and you're in a centers place type, your parking standards don't change. But if you are not in a centers place type, you're moving to that first tier that does not have a maximum and has greater minimums.
Hey, Ellen, this is Kevin. I just want to remind all of our participants today that you have the ability to unmute yourself. So don't feel like you have to necessarily type your questions out. Feel free to raise your hand or come off mute, and you may speak as well.
May I speak? It's Nancy.
Go ahead,
Go
Nancy.
ahead, go ahead and take Ashley's.
Okay.
I pinged it. This was not necessarily in here. I thought maybe there was going to be a topic about one of the questions I had for a N1B zoning area. I have an existing duplex. I'm considering redeveloping it into either a duplex or triplex. And I believe they all need to be at least attached by a 10-foot load-bearing wall. Like if the third unit kind of is behind the front two, that third unit would have to have at least a 10-foot load-bearing wall to be considered attached and part of the triplex. Is that correct?
Yeah, Laura, do we want to tackle that here? Is that a question for a separate discussion with the zoning administrator?
I was just say that's already in the ordinance, and I'm going right now to look for it. Kevin, I don't know if by chance you've got that pulled up. I believe it's actually 20 feet.
It is, and we call it a common wall, not necessarily a load-bearing wall. Load-bearing is probably more the domain of the building code than zoning. We're looking for a 20-foot common wall to separate those or attach those units.
Okay.
Yeah, and do you have the page by chance, Kevin, that we could get to Ashley?
Certainly, in the text amendment, which you'll see for what we're here today, it's on the page for dwelling duplex, which you can find at 15-35. But it's the same language for tris or triplexes as well, which you'll find that language on 15-38. So 1535 or 1538 actually should help you out.
Okay, got it. And then I think my second question, this is what I thought there may have been a topic today, but I may have missed it. If I have, just a common street, the front two units are side by side, the third unit is kind of in the back. Does that third unit have to have an entry point, like a door that, while it might not be completely visible from the front of the street, does it have to be facing the front of the street? Do you follow me?
Yeah, I'm Kevin, I don't know if you're also doing the same thing, trying to find the language in the UDO. It should be in the prescribed conditions, I believe, for that use.
This sounds more like orientation, which might be in the residential building design standards. I'll tell you what, Ashley, could we touch base with you separately offline about this?
Sure.
Yeah, because it's not changing from what's currently in the ordinance with this text amendment.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, sometimes these individual examples are better talked about offline, and maybe even if there's a sketch or a diagram to help us understand what the issue is.
Could I go back now and ask this about, perhaps I'm conflating the definitions. I'm seeing center as being a zoning category, as a neighborhood center, but when you're saying that those building parking except in centers, place types, is that a reference to the 2040 plan, or is that another zoning category? That's what I don't understand, is overlapping zoning
Yes.
categories.
It's a reference to the policy map that
Thank
map
you.
the place types. Yes.
That totally
Yes.
explains it. Thank you, Laura.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the word centers will appear in both zoning districts and in place types. And so in the example that we cited, we're talking about a center's place type, which could be a neighborhood center, a community activity center, or a regional activity center.
But not a zoning category.
Correct.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay. All right, good questions. Well, let's move on then, and I'll have one more opportunity after I cover this next step slide, and just do a final wrap up and final question Q&A if there are any. So for our next steps, you can see the timeline on the screen. Again, we filed the text amendment in October. Yesterday and today, we are doing our community review and comments. You are welcome to provide any comments. We ask that you use our email address that I will share at the end, and I think I shared at the beginning. Public hearing on November 18th at the City Council meeting. If we make any changes to this text amendment, and it's entirely possible that we'll be doing that over the next couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. Those changes will be reflected when we go to the zoning committee for its recommendation on December 3rd, and a final decision by the City Council currently scheduled for December 16th. And if it is approved by the City Council, the text amendment would go into effect upon approval. This is where you can go, and you've probably already been here to register for these sessions, but the charlotteudo.org website, if you click the button at the top that says UDO amendments, it will take you to the page that you see on the left of the screen. And in that turquoise colored box, read the proposed text amendment. Click there and you can see the complete red line version of the UDO text amendment. If we do revise this, you'll find the revised text amendment there at some future point. The UDO.org website is also where you can go to find the recording of today's meeting, as well as a PDF of all of the slides that we've looked at today. And that wraps up our presentation. And again, thank you all for coming. We can stay here for a couple of minutes if we've got any further questions or comments.
Alan, if I may jump in here right quick, just for some logistics for our participants, following up on what you just said, if anybody goes to the UDO amendments webpage at the UDO website, you will already find the slide deck from our information session posted. So that's ready now, as well as the recording from yesterday evening's virtual information session. The recording from today's session should be up on that site within 5 business days. Additionally, Pam Johnson, you had your hand up. I didn't know if you still had something that you wanted to ask or comment on. I know you've since put your hand down, but I wanted to give that opportunity and circle back to you if you wanted to have a comment or some feedback. Your microphone is working. Very good. I'm sorry about that. That's all I had, Alan.
Yeah, and if there's anything you want to put in the chat, Pam, we could certainly try to handle it.
Yeah, or if not, email us with any questions. Okay, thank you, Pam. All right, again, thank you all for coming, and feel free to reach out to us through that email address with anything that comes to mind that we may not have covered today, or if you need some clarification after you go to the website and look at the slides again and something occurs to you that you wish you had asked, feel free to do that. If not, enjoy the rest of your day.